The 21st Dynasty of Egypt occupies a critical yet often misunderstood position in Egyptian history, marking the formal beginning of the Third Intermediate Period, a long era defined not by sudden collapse but by structural fragmentation, negotiated authority, and institutional survival. Spanning approximately from 1077 BC to 943 BC, this dynasty emerged in the aftermath of the New Kingdom's exhaustion, particularly following the reign of the later Ramesside kings. Egypt at this moment was no longer capable of sustaining imperial projection, large-scale military campaigns, or centralized control over vast temple economy. Instead, it adopted by reorganizing power geographically and institutionally, producing a political system that was decentralized yet remarkably stable when compared to later phases of the Third Intermediate Period. The roots of the 21st dynasty lie in the gradual erosion of loyal authority during the late 20th dynasty. After the death of Ramesses III, Egypt faced repeated economic crises, labor strikes, corruption within temple administration, and declining control over foreign territories. The traditional model of divine kingship, which had rested on military success, centralized taxation, and monumental construction, became increasingly unstable, as well as unsustainable. Royal power treated from Thebes, the long-standing religious and ideological heart of Egypt, towards the Nile Delta, where control over trade routes and agricultural resources offered a more defensible base of authority. Out of this context arose the Tanite kings, who established their capital at Tanis, a city that would define the political identity of the dynasty. Tanis was not chosen for religious prestige, but for strategic necessity. Located in the eastern delta, it provided access to Mediterranean trade networks, proximity to Asiatic routes, and insulation from the entrenched power of the Theban priesthood. The rulers of the 21st dynasty governed primarily from this northern base and exercised effective authority over Lower Egypt. Their control over Middle and Upper Egypt, however, was largely nominal. In Thebes, the High Priests of Amun commanded vast economic resources, controlled temple lands, managed local militias, and acted as de facto rulers of the south. This division of power didn't result in constant warfare or open rebellion, but rather in the system of parallel governance in which political kingship and religious authority coexisted in a carefully balanced arrangement. The founder of the dynasty, Semendes, also known as Nesbandjed I, exemplifies this adaptive strategy. Rather than attempting to reassert full territorial unity through force, Semendes accepted the reality of divided authority. He ruled as pharaoh in Lower Egypt, adopted full royal titulary, and conducted foreign relations while recognizing the autonomy of the Theban priesthood. This pragmatic approach prevented civil war and allowed both regions to function with relative stability. The kings who followed him adhered to the same model, preserving continuity rather than pursuing risky consolidation efforts that Egypt no longer had the resources to sustain. One of the most significant rulers of the dynasty, whose long reign stands as a paradox of political limitation and cultural grandeur. Although his effective territorial control was restricted, he invested heavily in royal ideology, burial practices, symbolic continuity with the new kingdom. His tomb at Tanis, discovered nearly intact, contained extraordinary quantities of gold, silver, and finely crafted objects, including a gold funerary mask that reveals that of Tutankhamun in quality. This burial demonstrates that material wealth, artistic skill, and religious worldview of Egypt remained intact even as the structure of political power changed. Our understanding of the dynasty is shaped by both contemporary evidence and later historical tradition. Much of the classic framework for Egyptian dynastic history derives from the writings of Manetho of Cephintos, whose epitome of Egyptian history describes the 21st dynasty as lasting 130 years. Modern Egyptology, drawing on archaeological data, inscriptions such as Karnak priestly annals, and comparative chronology, has refined this timeline, and Manetho's account remains essential for understanding how later Egyptians conceptualized this era importantly. The very fact that the dynasty was recorded as legitimate reflects that its acceptance within Egyptians' historical memory, and despite its departure from early modes of centralized rule. In broader historical terms, the 21st century represents as not a collapse of Egyptian civilization but a strategic contradiction and reconfiguration. Egypt withdrew from imperial ambition and accepted a reduced geopolitical role, but it preserved its cultural role, religious institutions, and social hierarchies. The state adopted to diminish resources by centralizing authority rather than allowing it to fragment violently. This capacity for institutional flexibility is one of the most and important defining strengths of Egyptian civilization and explains its remarkable longevity over millennia. The legacy of the 21st century is therefore one of survival through adaptation. It laid the structural foundation for consequent third intermediate period dynasties, particularly the Libyan 22nd dynasty, which would inherit both the decentralized political model and the powerful role of temple institutions. By redefining kingship in pragmatic terms while maintaining ideological continuity, the Tanite rulers ensured that Egypt endured as a coherent civilization even when the age of empire had passed. The 21st dynasty stands the case study of how ancient states respond to systematic stress, demonstrating that endurance doesn't always require expansion, but often depends on intelligent distribution of power.